of my wonderful Viking friends. If this is an odd video, that's because it is. It's a very odd video. I decided to have my roots dyed a little bit so that I could get things, well, squared away on this end because they were kind of showing. My natural hair color is kind of a mousy blonde or a really light brown color, and I look a little bit better blonde, I think. I was going to go red, but I decided not to at the end of the day because I kind of look a little weird in red. And I have copper highlights anyway, so I thought, well, maybe just going just straight blonde would actually work out for the best and giving it a nice tone. Plus, my hair does lighten up during the summer when I'm out and about pillaging and plundering and doing some crazy stuff out in the wilderness that I usually do. Anyway, what I decided to do was I decided to also talk about my study that got thrown out the window. So I have been working diligently and very hard. It's been really difficult, but I decided to conduct a study on how women perceive metabolic syndrome. And that study was going good, and I had my dissertation ready to rock and roll, ready to get things all situated so that I could finally finalize my whole entire process. But my committee finally came down and said, we're not feeling comfortable about the process, the methodology. It just is not working. It just doesn't feel like a case study at the end of the day, and it's just too convoluted. You really need to button it up, tighten it up. And that partially is my fault because I was kind of scattered in all things. Metabolic syndrome is a very, very big topic. It's one of those topics that will probably take a lot of discernment, and at the end of the day, I can't button it up tight enough to get a single study done, especially a study that does not have any backing from any institution or anything like that other than, well, out of my own pocket. So there was that. I'm going to say that metabolic syndrome, if you haven't been diagnosed, that's because you're not alone. Metabolic syndrome is one of those syndromes that doctors are not paid enough from the insurance companies to diagnose. They usually diagnose the syndromes within metabolic syndrome. The hypertension, the high triglycerides, the high cholesterol, low HDL, and the diabetes. Those are the fundamental markers for metabolic syndrome. The insurance companies don't usually pay out for the diagnosis of metabolic syndrome itself, which is a very big problem. If you don't know if you have something, how could you fix it? The pharmaceutical companies and the doctors, they just want to prescribe and let go. And they decide that they want to placate. I'm going to use that word out there. Placate, and to alleviate the symptoms of such syndromes. Like if you have hypertension, bringing down your numbers just ever so slightly to be healthier. Never mind the problems underneath. So what are some of the problems and what can we do to fix them? Well, a person who has metabolic syndrome might have high insulin levels. And high insulin levels are, believe it or not, due to lots of carbs. A normal American would be told to eat a couple of times a day, 4, 5, 6 times a day, and to vary their carb intake, because apparently bread and rice and quinoa, they're all healthy for you. And actually they're not. And the reason being is because the pancreas releases insulin into the bloodstream to deal with the carbohydrates. So the carbohydrates are released into the bloodstream. They have to have somewhere to go. So they enter the cells via insulin. Insulin pushes them into the cells. But what if you eat a lot of sugar and a lot of carbohydrates? Well, you're going to have a lot of insulin. If the insulin can no longer push enough glucose into the cells, then the glucose wanders around the bloodstream trying to figure out where it's supposed to go. Think of a really, really, really big traffic jam and a lot of people trying to get home. They're going to take the side roads to try to get home. But does it alleviate the highway? Not for a couple hours, that's for sure. Imagine if you have a highway and you go from 3 or 4 lanes down to 1 lane each. And you're trying to get the cars to go. Well, imagine if there are 2,000 or 3,000 cars that have to get home. That's going to be a big traffic jam. And as soon as those cars start to disseminate and go on side roads, then you send another 2,000 cars into the highway, the traffic jam. That's exactly what's happening on the level of the glucose, blood glucose. You have several thousand cars trying to get to somewhere, and there's a traffic jam and can't go anywhere. The highway doesn't clear. Why would it? What happens after a high level of glucose is glycation. Glucose actually destroys cells. It destroys blood cells, destroys hepatic cells, destroys cardiovascular cells, and unfortunately, it causes inflammation. And then there's a cascade of events. So not only do you have a bunch of inflammation and glycation, which is the destruction of the cells, but you have the various factors of infiltrating various organs. For example, the liver, which intakes a lot of glucose itself, can't deal with the influx of glucose that's coming in. So it just pile drives more adipose tissue, and it causes non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which could be reversed. But the problem with people who are given the diagnosis of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is they're not given methods to reverse it. Instead, they're told to go home and take medication and to eat better, or watch carbohydrates, or reduce calories. But not a lot of information is given. And when I talk to people about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and I say, do not eat fruit, they have a cow. Actually, they don't, and that's part of the problem. What they end up doing is they end up reducing their sugar intake, but then they don't reduce their actual glucose intake and their carbohydrate intake. And believe this or not, carbohydrates are just sugar. The body just reviews them as sugar. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I reduce the amount of sugar, but fruit is natural sugar, so it's better for you. Or I'll hear, well, this isn't real sugar, it's fructose. Okay, this is sugar. In the blood, it's sugar. It's glucose. It breaks down to glucose, and you have a problem with the amount of glucose you have in your bloodstream. And it's going into your liver and it's being converted to fat. Sorry, that's what's happening. And it's bogging down your liver. And so when your liver becomes infiltrated with fat, it's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And then it starts destroying the cells. Like I said, glucose destroys cells. So what happens is it's causing inflammation and it's destroying the liver cells. So eventually your NAFLD, your non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is becoming cirrhosis, slowly but surely. And after a couple of years, it could even take as long as 10 years. But it'll start to cause non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which basically is the precursor to cirrhosis of the liver. Once it starts turning to cirrhosis of the liver, it is no longer going to be reversible. So if I can get everybody on board with fixing their diet, having non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and fixing their diet into reversing that before it turns into cirrhosis of the liver, well, I guess I get ahead, I guess. Well, there are other problems too. And like I said, the sugar, the glucose, infiltrates cells. Part of the cells that it does also infiltrate is the kidney cells. It damages the kidneys. Now the kidneys, they are like a filter. If you could just imagine, I'm trying to think of a best way to put it, like a water filter, like a Brita water filter. If you take and put a bunch of weird stuff in your Brita water filter, it's going to eventually muck up the water filter. And the first little bit might come out clear, but after a couple of rounds of putting weird stuff in your Brita water filter, it'll end up coming out weird colors and maybe tasting a little strange. And that's because your filter, the filter has to remain clear and unclogged. Well, if you damage the filter or clog it up, muck it up, what's going to end up happening is the filtration system won't work properly and things back up. Your kidneys are interesting in that they also are in charge of your potassium and your sodium levels. So as they're trying to excrete the glucose, which are damaging the kidneys, what's happening is they are trying to excrete as much sodium and potassium as well. So a lot of people with diabetes have a hard time with their sodium and potassium levels because the kidneys are excreting the glucose. Now, after a while, the kidneys start to, well, deteriorate because they're being damaged. Glucose damages the cells in the kidneys. And what happens is the kidneys start to malfunction and deteriorate, and they might develop cysts. They might just stop working altogether. And it leads to chronic kidney disease, which, if prolonged kidney damage prevails, then it leads to chronic kidney damage and renal disease and renal failure. That's when you have to go get dialysis. And a lot of type 2 diabetics result in dialysis. And that's the unfortunate part, is all of this could be reversed if caught early. Again, going back to the sugars, you have to get rid of the sugars. You have to get rid of the sugars. You have to get rid of the carbs. I'm sorry, but fruit is bad for you. believe this or not, how fruit is bad for you, and so is jerking my head around. Unfortunately, the chronic glycation can result in damaged kidneys and can lead to other events like cancer or cysts. If you're so lucky to not have chronic kidney failure, then you might also suffer from, well, retinopathy. I could not figure out why my eyes were so bad for so long. I was what was called counting fingers. And that was because my eyes were so bad I could not see, even with glasses on, and I had to have contacts underneath my glasses at the end. And I ended up getting LASIK eye surgery. If somebody would have told me, cut the sugar out, that would have been a lot easier. Because turns out, glycation, the damaging of cells from sugar, that causes retinopathy, and it causes damage in the eyes. So the fact that I couldn't see was more than likely due to the fact that I had a lot of sugar intake and prolonged sugar intake and high glucose levels. Along with the inflammation, another problem that a lot of people face is memory loss and even dementia. Glycation is one of those things that it doesn't care where it damages, it just damages whatever. It's not very specific. It just starts damaging stuff. Kind of like rust. Rust just starts rusting. And it picks a place and starts rusting. Same with the organs and the tissues within the body. Somebody could be as lucky as having something rust on one part but not on another part. Some people have rust all over their bodies, and that's a very horrible thing when it's dementia. Dementia has hit the news lately, and I'm not going to go into that part of why, but I can tell you it is horrible, and I would not wish dementia on my worst enemies, because stage 1 and stage 2 could be as simple as forgetting keys, maybe forgetting where you put the piece of paper at that you had a phone number written on. It could be as simple as forgetting an appointment that you had to go to. But stage 3 is when it starts to get serious. Stage 3 dementia is when you start mixing up things, you start mixing up memories, maybe people in your life, you can't remember what a person's name was, or you can't remember where something was. And then memories start getting mixed up and you misplace maybe a certain somebody's birth date, or you forgot an anniversary or something very important, and you mix that up with a different memory. And then stage 4. Stage 4 is, if you could just imagine taking a memory from 25 years ago, just a random memory, and then combining that with a memory that happened 6 years ago. And so you sound goofy when you start talking about a pet that you had and how you fell off of something and broke a leg. And people are like, what are you talking about? But then time kind of combines as well, because, for example, I have had somebody accuse me of being their ex-wife from 40 years ago. And I'm sorry, I am not your ex. I've never been married to you. I don't even know who you really are. And they were adamant that I was their ex-wife, and they were very, very mad at me for leaving him. I didn't understand that whole thing, but it was very awkward at the end, and he was definitely confusing me with some of his memories from 40 years ago. And then you have stage 5. Now, stage 4 is where you start noticing some klutziness going on. Maybe you're not as agile as you used to be, and you slip and fall often. But stage 5, you really do not have the eye-hand coordination that you used to. And dementia is one of those things where it happens differently in different people, and now there are several diagnoses of different types of dementia, which I'm actually happy, because 15, 20 years ago, it was just Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, there are so many different classifications, and it actually alleviates a lot of pressure on friends and family where the dementia is headed. For example, if it's frontal lobal dementia, then it's going to affect the personality. Just for example, if the dementia is in the hippocampus, it's going to affect more of the memories. And then there are dementias that affect the motor skills, for example. So you've got different types of dementia. It really depends on what areas of the brain are being affected. Obviously, there are different types of dementia that are caused by different aspects as well. For example, tumors and maybe some various damage from other things. But when you get to the nitty-gritty, glycation is a big, huge cause of memory loss and dementia. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about that. So after stage 5, you get into the very scary part, where stage 6 is where the person completely forgets people, places, and things. Things like birthdays, things like weddings, people in their lives, and really things that used to happen, that has happened, disappear. Almost like somebody took your phone out of your hand and started deleting photos. And you can't remember which photos they deleted. And there's nowhere to back them up. There's no way to retrieve them. Imagine those memories, those photos completely gone forever. That's where stage 6 is. You forget that you have children, you forget that you have loved ones, siblings, spouses, pets, and then stage 7. Stage 7, if you make it that far, unfortunately a lot of people don't, but if you hit stage 7, you don't know who you are. You can't remember anything, and you're a shell of a person. And I have known a lot of people, and I've worked with a lot of people that have progressed to stage 6 and to stage 7, and I can tell you, it's not pretty. It's devastating. It's hard on friends, it's hard on family, it's especially hard on loved ones as the progression happens. And if your loved one gets to stage 7, they're not going to be themselves. It's going to be a horrific journey, and I wish this on nobody. But it can be reversed in the earlier stages. And like I had said, removing all of the fructose, all of the natural sugars, all of the stuff that glycates the body. That's the way to do this. The next step for the glycation is into the gonads. And this is one of those topics that is hard for a lot of people to talk about, but I'm going to just talk about PCOS and low T. If you are a female and you are suffering from PCOS, it is devastating, and I feel for you. But the androgen to estrogen happens when insulin is down. Insulin levels, if they're high, wreaks havoc on the entire body. So you got to drive the insulin levels down. Otherwise, estrogen levels don't get to the places that they need to get to. And the more testosterone you have, the more weird stuff happens to your body, like hair growth in weird and awkward places that shouldn't happen. And also, very difficult and hard to manage menses and pain and other problems as well that PCOS creates. But males can also experience weird effects from hyperinsulinemia or high amounts of insulin. Insulin is one of those things that causes low testosterone. And so if you're having experiences with weird balding sensations, then maybe you have too high of insulin. And maybe you need to lower your insulin levels. The only way to do that is to get rid of the amount of carbohydrates you're eating. One of the biggest problems that hyperinsulinemia and high glucose levels and oxidation and inflammation create is cardiovascular disease. Now, for the longest time, saturated fat and meats were to blame. And we can blame Ansel Keys for all of that misguidance, we'll call it. But the elephant in the room is the sugar. Notice how, as Americans started eating lower fat, higher sugar, the incidence rates of both A1C levels, so diabetes, prediabetes went up, high triglyceride levels went up, and high cholesterol levels went up, and cardiovascular disease. Weirdly enough, there was a strange little N of 1 study done by a doctor who decided to eat Oreo cookies to lower his LDL cholesterol levels, and he was successful. Oreo cookies lowers LDL cholesterol, weirdly enough, right? That is weird. Not saying that you should go out and eat a bunch of Oreos, because Oreos are not good for you, obviously. But maybe our markers for cardiovascular disease have been completely wrong. And I kind of spelled this out in my study, where maybe we should be more concerned about oxidation and inflammation stemming from glycation, or the amount of glucose within the bloodstream causing damage. Maybe our heart health is directly impacted by glycation and inflammation, rather than the cholesterol that has been deemed bad. And maybe it's the oxidation of the cholesterol, the plaques within the arterial walls, that is actually damaging our heart and our vascular system. It could be that we've been making a big deal about nothing and not making enough of a big deal about something that should be made a big deal out of. Could be. But when I threw this all together in my study, I was kind of hit hard, saying this is kind of a scattered study. There's not real focus on any such thing, and the perceptions are kind of here and there. And what do you mean by perceptions? Which get into psychology, because that's a big deal, actually, is the perceptions of. And so when my methodologist came up to me and said, we need to figure out something better, I thought, well, I'm not sure what I need to do. And then I thought, I'm good at cooking. And I'm good at cooking ketogenic recipes, ketovore recipes. I'm getting used to slam dunking some carnivore recipes. I'm getting really good at that kind of thing. And what if I decide that I am going to do a study on cooking for people? I thought, well, if I throw together a cooking class for people and decide that maybe watching them cook and how they decide to change their lifestyle, maybe that could be a study. And so here I am in another semester throwing thousands of dollars into an institution that is really geared for vegetarian and vegan and plant-based lifestyles. And I am going to present next week a ketogenic cooking class for health. Maybe pre-diabetes, because there's a lot of literature on pre-diabetes, and I can do a lot with people with pre-diabetes. Again, I've been saying reverse a lot because I know all of these diseases that I just mentioned can be reversed. I know that. The literature is out there. You have to dig deep, but it's here and it's there and it's scattered. And so when you collect it all and you say, yes, this is what causes it, this is what happens, this is how you reverse it. And then an institution says, well, I don't know if there's enough evidence for it. oh no, the evidence is out there. You just have to dig, and you have to dig deep. And I think it comes down to money. But here I am, putting another semester in, clinching on, and getting it done. I will get this paper done. I'll get this proposal done, and I will present this and see if my committee is on board with it. And I'm good at cooking. Well, I think I'm good at cooking. I don't know. The fire department hasn't been called in a little bit, so maybe I'm getting better. I don't know. Anyway, I do have my fire alarm, my fire detector on, just in case. Because we never know in this household. But anyway, so that's what I'm doing. Meanwhile, I'm going to let my hair sit, and then I'm going to wash it out. And I am going to reveal it in my next video. Everybody's hungry, and I'm going to see what's in my fridge. I'm not sure if I have enough for maybe a chicken cordon bleu, or maybe something that I could throw together with some bacon. I'll see. I don't know yet. But I'm going to get this trash bag off of me, and I'm going to, I don't know, I'm going to get it done. So I'll see you in the next video, my friends. Lika till. So, at the end of the day, I lost my train of thought. The hair Buddha would be losing his mind if he were to watch this video. I am getting hot and sweaty. I have no way to... Okay, I guess I'm gonna just sit here. What if I went platinum?
Oh my god. You went plaid.
Yeah, right? Plaid. I should shave my head and dye like a little part of it pink.
Go Britney, bitch.
Oh, I know, right? I was thinking Sinead O'Connor, but Britney.